So I've been asked to talk to us all about new shoots, because right across the Methodist Church, right now, there are new shoots that are beginning to appear. Not all are big, not always polished, but they are real signs of life and of possibility. They are new places, new communities, new people who are encountering faith in ways that simply did not exist a few years ago. And if I'm honest, I think it's all pretty exciting. Sometimes they happen in cafes, sometimes around tables, sometimes in places you would never expect church to be or emerge from. And I thought it might be really good for us this afternoon just to take a little bit of time to reflect on some of these happenings as they have emerged. Because I feel that there is a really important biblical principle here for us, and a pattern that is beginning to emerge. So it's not just helpful in thinking about new places for new people, but also could be hopefully really helpful for some of our established churches as well. And that's because these new faith communities, these new shoots, they aren't coming from having a perfect plan. Thank goodness. They aren't coming from having it all together. Instead, they're emerging from people and situations where individuals and communities are willing to give things a go, are willing to try and flip the narrative that they're living in and try and turn it on its head. And they're engaging in this, what we call Christian pioneering. Now, the observant amongst you will notice I've given you all a bag of Lego. And that's because Christian pioneering is a bit like this bag of Lego. And in some ways, this is what pioneering can feel like. Because often when you're trying to engage in Christian pioneering, sometimes you have an idea of what you're aiming for. You have a sense of where you want to head to and the objective you have in mind. Sometimes it's a thought, or an enigma, or a picture, or a good feeling that you've got, or I suppose a more formal way we would talk about this is a sense of calling to start something new. But the problem with Christian pioneering is you don't necessarily get any instructions to go along with it. I'm afraid there's no step-by-step guide. So if you want, a little later, you can take your instructions out of your packet of Lego and throw it away. If you want, the challenge is there for you, if you want to accept it. Because really, actually, Christian pioneering is a bit more complicated than that. It's actually a bit of work, and it's like you're a little block of Lego. And in reality, it's like taking that bag I've given you all and throwing it up in the air, and then trying to work out which pieces will fit together as they fall, and try and build something before it hits the land, before it hits the ground. You're going to find things, you're going to work out which pieces you can build and put something together with. Sometimes it's a bit wonky looking, and that's okay. Sometimes pieces just don't fit together and you've got to try again. But it's all a bit chaotic. Sometimes to the outside world, it also looks a bit mad, let's be honest. Because this isn't necessarily the most straightforward way of trying to create communities. It's because, well, I think what is being discovered is that God is doing something in the midst of this messiness. And because not everything is clear, God is able to be in charge. He's able to take over. He's able to have an influence, because at the end of the day, sometimes we've just got to let go and trust God for the rest. Let God bring those pieces, those bricks together and form something new and grow new shoots. Is it right if we go to the next slide, if that's all right? The one back, if that's all right? Wonderful. Every single one of these is a live example of a new place to new people that's been founded over the last 5 years. In fact, there's quite a bit more than these. The Methodist Church isn't great at updating their website, let's be honest. But that's okay. And they've been formed over the last 5 years, where people are seeking to connect with God and rediscover or discover faith for the very first time, in a variety of different ways. Just to pick out a couple, there's one near the bottom there called Rev 7. It's down south. It isn't in a church building, There's no Sunday services. Instead, it just seems like an ordinary hair salon. So it's something very different for us to do as a Methodist church, if we're honest. But this is what is beginning to emerge. Something new and different is happening in that place. Something is beginning to take root and beginning to sprout new shoots. One of the leaders and founders of it, he initially joined the army. Then he felt a call to ordain ministry, and now he feels a call to cut hair in the name of the Methodist Church. That is a convoluted journey, isn't it just? No one could have predicted that journey to take place. But something, like I said, is happening. Not because a perfect straight line has been drawn or the perfect plan has been followed, but because those people in that place are desperately seeking to pay attention to the people who they wish to minister to, the community that they belong to discern how they can support them, get alongside them, and help what may be missing. What looks completely ordinary from the outside is becoming a place where new faith is sprouting new shoots. Just to quickly take another example, I think it's somewhere near the Middle-ish, I think. There's also a place called Street Banquet, which is occurring in Birmingham. At its heart, it's just a meal. If you go on the Methodist Church website, you can read a little blurb about these. And when you look at Street Banquet, it's literally just a meal. That's it. People gather around tables, they share food. It's nothing complicated, nothing flashy, but in this simple space, people who wouldn't normally walk into church are finding belonging, are finding the thing that they feel they need most. Stories are being shared, relationships are being formed, and faith is beginning to grow around a table. What from the outside, again, just looks like a completely normal meal that's taking place, is actually becoming a place of transformation for those folk in Birmingham. And we, in Chester and Stoke on Trent, we have our own new places for new people under our Waymakers banner. Currently at the Haven in Crewe and Dinner Hub in Alsager. And hopefully over the next couple of months, there may be a couple more MPMPs begin to emerge in our district as well. But if you take a step back for a second, again and again, I feel that there is a pattern here that is emerging. None of these things have grown out of a place of strength. None of them have grown out of a place of certainty. None of them have grown out of a sense of a perfect plan, or even join the dots going A to B to C. Instead, all of them have sprouted out of limitation, out of simplicity, out of, and even at times, what we would call weakness or challenge or obstacles. That's where all these things have come from. And that's where our Lego kind of comes back in. Because does anyone know the story of the company called Lego? Do you know the Lego company story? I see one or two nods. Go to the next slide, is that all right? Apparently, from the 1980s onwards, the Lego company was in massive decline. In fact, at the turn of the millennium, Lego very, very nearly went bankrupt. Not because people stopped liking Lego, but because, in some ways, Lego had stopped being about Lego. It increasingly, in desperate attempts to turn their fortunes around, had expanded into everything you could possibly think of. They'd opened theme parks, they'd started clothes lines, they'd got endless new products on the shelves, and it had become complicated. It had become really costly for their manufacturing, and it had become very difficult for them to manage. They drifted from the simple idea that made them brilliant in the first place, and as a company, they'd become brittle and resistant, and even at times of lashing out against others. When the whole world, at the turn of the millennium, was bracing itself and eager to go digital, Lego dug its heels in. When kids started making their own what they call brick films, stock animated films using Lego, the Lego company initially didn't see this as a gift. They thought this was a threat, and even attempted to sue a couple of children. Children literally biting off the very hands that was trying to feed them. And so their profits continued to drop, and rapidly, until eventually they hit a moment when the Lego company had to do something different. I mean, wouldn't it be really sad if we now lived in a world without Lego? Eh? I know my kids will be upset, and definitely my wife will be. But the reason why I'm sharing this story with you is, and why I find it so important and powerful, is because Lego didn't fix their situation by adding more. Instead, they went back. They stripped their company down, they cut huge parts of their business away, and returned to the core of what they have always been about, the brick. Simple, open-minded, creative play. That's their core. That's what they have always been about. And by doing this, they realised that they could trust and listen to their fans and embrace them and not try and control them. That they could step more into the world around them, the digital age that was beginning to dawn, instead of trying to fight it. And slowly things turned around. What looks like weakness, the loss, the cutbacks, the simplicity, even failure, were the very things that became their greatest strengths. And today, my goodness, Lego is bigger than ever, isn't it? See small faces when I was handing out those packets of Lego. I tell you, it's not just for children, is it? Eh? People love it. In fact, I think in our district, we've got a number of church Lego groups, haven't we? It's that popular now that we've tried to adopt their brand. It's that good. But they've done all of this not by becoming more complex, or more resistant, or more competitive, or more cutthroat, but by rediscovering what they once had. The thing they once thought was too simple to stand alone has once again become their foundation, in which new things have sprouted and they've grown from. So the Lego company has discovered something important. What looks like weakness was actually the place they needed to return to. Not something to avoid, but something to build from. But this afternoon, it's not a TED talk. There's no red spot on the floor there. I'm not sharing this as some kind of motivational talk, because I feel that there is a deeply Christian principle in this, and that we're seeing in our new places for new people. It's part of the pattern that we discover whenever we open up our Bibles and read Scripture. It's part of our narrative, again and again. Go to the next slide, is that right? Take Ruth, for example. She arrives with almost nothing. She lost her husband, lost her home, and now she's in a foreign land with no status, no security, no clear future. She doesn't even belong there, do you know what I mean? But yet here she is. And the only way she is surviving is by walking behind harvesters of the field and picking up the leftover scraps from the ground. This is definitely not a position of strength. But day by day, Ruth shows up. Faithful, quiet, and consistent. And in those ordinary, overlooked moments, something slowly begins to shift. She ends up in the field of Boaz, someone who sees her, who eventually wishes to build a relationship with her, and who makes space for her. And slowly Ruth's story begins to change. This outsider finds belonging, and the one with nothing becomes part of a family again. And generations later, Ruth's name is written into the family line of Jesus, making Ruth's story part of Jesus' story. An outsider accepted, something broken made whole. What began as loss ends up being legacy. What looks like weakness became the very place that God began to build something new from. Sometimes the strength that God is growing isn't loud or even instant. It looks like turning up again and again with what little we have. And then, if we go back a slide, if that's right, you've got Paul. Paul in the New Testament. I mean, he's the kind of leader you thought we'd have it all together, wouldn't you? Right? Paul? He's a church planter, he's a missionary, he's a writer, he's a real theologian. Others are constantly looking to him for answers. But Paul shares that he's carrying something. He has a thorn in his flesh. We're not told exactly what he means by this. Just that it's painful, it's unpleasant, and it doesn't ever seem to go away. 3 times he asked God to take it from him. 3 times Paul prays. But God's answer isn't healing. It's simply that my grace is sufficient for you. This weakness isn't removed, it's simply reframed. So Paul makes a decision. Instead of hiding his weakness, he starts boasting of it. Because somehow, in that place of limitation, God's power is showing up more clearly. And this is the same Paul who goes on to shape the early church and write letters that we still read in our churches, and who carries a message right across the world. Not because he's overcome his weakness, but because he's learned to let God work through it. The thing Paul asks God to take away becomes the place God chooses to show up in most. When we name our weakness, whatever it may be, we can't assume that they're obstacles to be avoided or overcome, because they might actually be the clearest place that God wishes to work in us and through us and be seen in for the building of his kingdom. So Ruth arrives with nothing. Paul carries a pain that never goes away. The Lego company nearly went bankrupt. The Haven in Crewe was built after a church had closed. The dinner hub in Alsager started after the global pandemic. Mount Cock, as we heard this morning, the camp meetings started because a load of colliers felt excluded. Different stories. But I feel it is the same pattern again and again. What looks like weakness becomes the place God chooses to work. And if that's true, not just for them, but for us, then the question isn't how can we get rid of our weaknesses? How can we overcome our problems? It's simply what might God want to do through them or with us next. So I've done quite a bit of talking this afternoon. I thought it'd be good actually if we start sharing a little bit together, if that's okay. We've got about 9 minutes, so we have to be a bit snappy. And there's 3 things I want you to do in these 9 minutes. We can go to the next slide if that's all right. Wonderful. First of all, turning to someone next to you in 2s or 3s, I want you to name it, okay? Go around in your small group and name what feels like a limitation or weakness in your faith community right now. Name it. Be honest, but keep it constructive. We've only got 3 minutes, so no rants, okay? Name it. Then secondly, I want you to then go around and try and reframe those weaknesses. If God were to work through these, not necessarily remove them, but work through them, what could that possibly look like? Yeah? Let's try and imagine what that could possibly look like. And then thirdly, try it. What one small step could you do to test this theory? Okay? Keep it small. Doesn't need to be a strategic master plan. Just a simple next step to test it. This isn't an exercise in trying to find perfect answers. It's just about noticing possibilities. And in the end of the day, we've only got 9 minutes and we can't fix the world. All right? Is that okay? Name it, reframe it, try it. Okay? Off we go.